Islamophobia is a concrete and daily reality for Muslim communities across Canada and around the world. Today, Sheikh Ismael Mukhtar will talk about Winnipeg's experience with Islamophobia. This is Zuhair. Welcome to Civic Platform. Assalamu alaikum.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
How are you today, Sheikh Ismail? Welcome to Civic
Uh,
Platform.
I am doing great and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for accepting my invitation. Uh, to start to talk about this topic, Islamophobia, everyone once just they hear about this definition, they feel like it looks like a disease or something very scary. So before we begin, can you just introduce yourself, Sheikh? Who are you and what are you doing?
Well, my name is Ismael Mukhtar, and I've been a resident of Winnipeg for many years. And I do a lot of volunteer work with the Muslim community in Winnipeg. I served before as the president of the main Muslim organization, the Manitoba Islamic Association. And recently I published a book about the history of Muslims in this province, a book titled Manitoba Muslims, A History of Resilience and Growth.
Nice. So when we hear about Islamophobia, in the history, when did this definition first appear and why?
Well, I guess the term Islamophobia, is made up of two terms. One is Islam, the other one is phobia. And phobia, I guess, as everybody would understand, is unfounded fear. So some people, for example, have fear of high-rise building. Some people have fear of traveling in a plane. Even there are people who have fear from driving. And there are people who have fear from public speaking. So this type of fear is unfounded fear. It's not a real fear. It's just, and some kind of imagination that a person might have. So that's what phobia is, generally speaking. Now, when you add that to Islam, it simply means unfounded fear of Islam. So there are people who have some kind of fear about Islam or some notion or understanding of what Islam is, of what Muslims are, and the practices of Islam, and they have a completely erroneous understanding, and not only an erroneous understanding, but also there is some fear, some hatred associated with that. So that's basically, generally speaking, about Islamophobia. Now, Islamophobia as a social phenomenon or social behavior has been there for, from day one. It's not something new. It's not something that came in the 90s or the 20s. There have been always historically people who had some unfounded fear of Islam. But probably this term became more prevalent in the Western media, after the Iranian Revolution, and then in the 90s when, different things happening all over the world. So with that, the term started becoming more common. And unfortunately, today there are people who in a very subtle way have been promoting Islamophobia in one way or another.
When that definition appeared, how the Muslims in the entire history, when that definition appeared, how they defend themselves, what they did about Islamophobia?
Well, there are a number of things that lead to Islamophobia. One is ignorance. Second is fear. and third is hate. Now, the remedy for ignorance is education, awareness, and also remedy for fear is to meet with people, talk with people, socialize with people. Hate is difficult. That's the most difficult part of Islamophobia. But when it comes to ignorance, when it comes to fear, that can be remedied, as I said, through outreach, through dialogue. And Muslims, wherever they went, they have been trying to explain their faith, and verbally, and also by action, by showing people who they are, their values, their ethics, and also socially, by living together with other people. There is a study made by an author of a book, I think his name is True Love. And he says, basically, the book is about Islamophobia. One of the things he mentions that the more Canadians come to know Muslims, the more they start to respect them and appreciate them. So the main thing that Muslims have been doing, particularly in the West, is outreach. So for example, after September 11, there was a lot of open houses. So mosques were organizing open houses so that people of other faith would come to the mosque, meet Muslims, and come to understand that Muslims, like everyone else, they have their families, they want to have, a career, they want to have a good neighborly relationship. So outreach was something that Muslims have taken very, very seriously, particularly after those unfortunate incidents, and also having Islam awareness activities, programs in the universities and other places, so that people would have a better appreciation and understanding of Islam.
And you have been for a long years in Winnipeg. How the Winnipegians deal with Islamophobia in this previous years?
Yeah, well, I guess relatively speaking, Manitoba is more friendly when it comes to people of other faith and other ethnic background. And I'm saying, for example, in relation to what we are seeing in Quebec, for example. But that does not mean that we did not have, experiences with Islamophobia in Manitoba. There have been many instances. For example, our main mosque, or the oldest and the first mosque, have been vandalized many times. In the beginning from 2000 to 2006. This is not only once, many times it has been vandalized, and hate messages were left were written graffitis in the walls of the mosque and the door of the mosque, in addition to many hateful phone calls. So yeah, we had those kinds of unfortunate instances. There were some hateful articles written, for example, in the Winnipeg Free Press, which Muslims were very much offended, and they pointed that to the Winnipeg Free Press at that time, which which positively they acknowledged that publishing that article, for example, was wrong, and they publicly issued an apology to that. So these are just some examples, but still we are witnessing instances of Islamophobia, especially with a woman, a Muslim woman, because Muslim women are easily identifiable. They wear hijab and people see them in the malls and the streets, and so there are many reports that have been reported to the community of women being subjected to some Islamophobia more than men. And about a week ago, a study was published by the Manitoba Islamic Association. They surveyed the community, asking them about their experiences with with Islamophobia, and a good percentage of the respondents, they indicated that either they have experienced Islamophobia or they know somebody who have been exposed to some kind of hate, Islamophobia-driven hate, unfortunate experience in public sphere.
Sheikh Ismail, you mentioned your book, Manitoba Muslim, A History of Resilience and Growth. The idea of this book, when it comes to your mind, there is a purpose and there is a goal you want to achieve from this book to serve all the Muslim community. Can you tell me more about your book and um, some of the examples of the chapters and what the message it sent to the Muslim community?
Okay. Well, the one of the main purposes of the book is to document the history of Muslims in the province.
Mhm.
Now, Muslims have a presence that goes to the early 1900s.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, most of that history was not documented. I would say until 1960s, um, not much has been maintained or not much has been reserved. And I notice in many community forums, the common understanding was that our history goes back to 1960. So through doing some research and digging in the archives of different available resources, I think I was able to find out that there was a Muslim presence and not very large, but definitely important. There were many new immigrants who came in the 1904, 1906. They established businesses. They were very successful. They have a community in Brandon and so on and so forth. So a good part of that history has been lost, but whatever I managed to capture has been recorded in this book. So the main purpose of the book was basically to document the history of the community. Now, one of the challenges we had as a community was the elders who came in the 60s, they're getting old, their memory was fading, and there was a risk, even that chapter of our history could be lost and forgotten. So being somebody who've been here for a long time, I felt a duty on my shoulder that maybe I should undertake this and try to capture whatever information available to document the history of the community from the early 1900s to the current time. And that basically came to be the book that we are talking about. Now, the book is basically divided into two sections. So the first section is basically history. So it talks about who came first, what was the challenge they faced, what kind of businesses they established, what happened to their families and where did they go, because many of them ended up moving to Edmonton. So basically talking about the early comers and then talking about the phase of institution in the 1960s when the community established the first Islamic organization, the Manitoba Islamic Association, and then the establishment of the first mosque ever in the province in 1976. And then, the evolution of the community, the establishment of an Islamic school, the establishment of a larger center, and then the growth. And so all the phases that the community has gone to be where it is today, from a community just, was maybe probably in the hundreds. Today it is in the tens of thousands. So a community that has seen a huge growth. So the first chapter is basically focusing on that historical progression in the history of the community. The second section talks about the challenges that the community has experienced and starts talking about, for example, the youth, talks about women, talks about converts and the kinds of challenges that they face as a segment within the community. And also there are discussions about outreach, Muslim relation with indigenous people. Also talk about Islamophobia. So the Islamophobia is one of the largest sections talking about Islamophobic instances. So for example, what I mentioned about the vandalism, about the article, and there are many, many instances. So that section gives a good, overview of some of those experiences. And the book has a chapter also about future outlook, at least providing my perspective on what the community should do to move forward in positive directions in the future. So this is just a general, view of the book and the content of the book.
Sheikh Ismail, we are here a large community, like Muslim community, in a huge multicultures around us. So there are some examples from the Muslims, sometimes without any knowledge, without any idea, they do something wrong, and the other community looks for us as a Muslim doing something wrong. So how the Muslims should looks like a good examples for other community to not judging them and make that like highlight the Islamophobia more and more, and they just looking we are doing just like a wrong behaviors in the community. So what kind of advice you can give for this kind of Muslims?
Well, you see, human nature, human societies are not perfect. So Muslims are not, have their good ones, they have their bad ones. And this is not only Muslims, within the
Yeah,
Jewish community, within the Christian community, Hindu community, you have good people, you have bad people.
yeah,
So the same thing applies to Muslims. And I think we should look at it in the same way. When we just exaggerate some of the unfortunate behaviors that does not even reflect the teaching of Islam, and try to use that as basically stereotyping. And stereotyping basically is you take the behavior of few and you basically present it as if it is the behavior of everyone. So yeah, Muslims have some bad apples. That's true. There are also some bad apples in every community. But when you judge a community, you don't just take this, these anomalies and try to generalize. So I think that's where the challenge is. I mean, we as Muslims, we are not saying we are perfect. No, we are not perfect. We do have, like every other society, like every other community, we have people of every walk of life, and people who are true to their faith, true to their ethics, true to their faith, to their values, and people who might not be at the same level. So the same standards should be applied when there is a wrong in a Muslim community. Yeah, it should be pointed as wrong. The same way it is pointed in other communities. Where it becomes troubling is when there is a double standard when it comes to Muslims, when there is a stereotyping. I think that's where it becomes problematic. But definitely Muslims can be criticized. There are things that Muslims need to work harder to do better. And this is not unique to them. It's the same thing. It's human nature. Every society, every community has its own issues, its own struggles, and we are no different than anyone else.
Sheikh Ismail, you mentioned there is like some of incident happen in like different province with many of Muslims. The reaction from the government, we see like the prime minister, they say sorry, and he talked to the public about how we should respect all the communities and the Muslims. We don't need to see this kind of um, incident again and again. Is that enough, or we looking for something like a rule or something more from your point of view?
Well, I think, Islamophobia is not just, somebody writing a graffiti or somebody throwing insults on someone or for calling the Islamic Center and leaving hateful message. I think we have gone beyond that. We have seen what happened in Quebec. I mean, somebody going into mosque and shooting people, or what we have seen in London. I mean, this is something serious. So I think the level of the challenge we face with Islamophobia have come to a level that no government or no official can look at it as something secondary. I mean, hate is hate, and no matter what it is, large or small, it has to be addressed. But we are not talking now, when we talk about Islamophobia, as I said, a few phone calls here or graffitis here or pulling the hijab of a sister here, even that's serious. But we are talking about people losing their life just because of being Muslims.
Yeah.
And no responsible leader can take this very lightly. So that's why Muslims at every level, parliament, provincially, federally, have been calling upon the government and the officials that, yes, Islamophobia is real and it has consequences, and the government has to do more to to tackle this and work with Muslims and also other communities to fight hate in its general form, and also particularly Islamophobia.
Yeah. Sheikh Ismail, in the last minute, I'm looking for like a general advice for youth Muslims to be a good examples for their future and for their religion.
Well, I would say just be true to your Islamic values, because, if Muslims live by the values of Islam, they would be a shining, example. They would be the best citizens in the country, because the ethical values of Islam, honesty, integrity, respect of other people, caring, sharing, helping, all of these teachings of Islam, these are the foundations of a healthy family, foundations of a healthy society. And if Muslims live by this standard, they would definitely be role models. They would be very, helpful to the larger society. Historians, for example, tell us that in many regions, people came to know Islam through Muslim merchants who abided by the teaching of Islam, of being honest, having integrity, providing the highest and the best service to their customers. So I think I would say, let's live by the values of Islam, by the ethics of Islam. And I think that would be sufficient to let people know who Islam is. And also, as I said, outreach is important, and through outreach and working with other communities, we can create a more friendly society for everyone. And we are not talking only Islamophobia, we are talking anti-Semitism, we are talking any form of hate. Any human being should live in this planet respected and honored. Everybody have their own opinion, their own way of thinking. That's their right. But in the end, a human is a human, and every human should be treated with respect and dignity.
Sheikh Ismael Mukhtar, leader in Manitoba Muslim community, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
And here we have reached the end of our video. We hope you enjoyed it and gained new helpful information. Thank you for watching. If you like the video, please like, share, and subscribe to see our upcoming episodes.